right. Well, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm Joel Bodker.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Louisiana.
No way.
Right? Yeah. Not
Same.
Yeah, I know.
What part of Louisiana? I didn't know that.
Lafayette, Louisiana.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and we moved out to Dusson, which is like a little. I don't even know what you'd call it. I don't think the population was big enough for it to be a city or a town.
So,
just like that's that area over there.
yeah.
Dusson. Dusson, right outside of Lafayette. And moved to Texas when I was 12. Was there for 10 years. Moved to Los Angeles when I was 22.
Do you remember Louisiana very much? Or
yeah.
not?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We traveled back and forth several times a year because my parents' family, both mom and dad, all their siblings and moms and dads and everything were out there. So we were, although we moved away from 12, we were there consistently.
Yep. Do you still have family down there?
I still have family there. Just a couple aunts and uncles. A lot of my family have passed throughout the years, so not as much family, but still, that's kind of still breeding grounds for my aunts and uncles.
Yeah. So
then Texas for 10 years in San Antonio, and then moved to Los Angeles when I was 22, almost 23.
So you went middle school, high school, and then did you go to college in San Antonio?
So middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade were all in different schools. 6th grade was in Lafayette at a private Christian school. 7th grade was at Cornerstone, which was a private Christian school in San Antonio. And then 8th grade was my first year in public school.
Cornerstone, what's the pastor's name? Is that Hagee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Matt and John Hagee.
Yeah.
Pastors Matt and John Hagee. Yeah. Good guys. And
wow.
Awesome church, awesome ministry. And was there for 10 years, high school, and then did 3 years of college at a community college. And
was your superintendent Eshelman? Just out of curiosity?
At that time, I don't know, because I graduated high school in 2003. So,
Gotcha.
I mean, you're talking in 7th grade.
Probably would have been before his time.
Yeah, because that was, late 90s.
Yeah.
So I doubt that he was there. But I know he was at Cornerstone for a good bit.
Yeah.
And then, I went to college in San Antonio for 3 years. I started out as business management with a minor in accounting. And I think it was like my second math class. I was like, I hate math. Why am I doing accounting?
Not the best major for math.
I love simple math. Like simple, just like your basic everyday stuff is fine. I like numbers and stuff. But once we started getting into, calculus and pre-cal and all that stuff like that, I'm just like, this is pointless. I will, even if I did accounting, I won't use this.
Yeah, no thank you.
So, and then I dropped out, and I was while I was in college, I was doing construction. So I was working construction full-time and then doing night classes.
Were you also a full-time student? Wow.
Yeah.
I assume you were single.
I was very single. I was very single.
Very single.
Yeah,
okay.
very single. Working construction, going to school full time.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out life. I think at that point I had grown up in such an amazing household. Like the house was, the house we grew up in, as far as not the house, but the home we grew up in, was great. It was loving. Have amazing parents that are still together. And they're my dad's about to turn 70 later this year. They're celebrating 50 years of marriage. So I mean they've they've been awesome role models for us and stuff. And but I think the church we were part of in just that era, religion was you couldn't watch Smurfs because they did magic. Couldn't eat Lucky Charms because they were lucky. All the different things like that. So
no Harry Potter for sure.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Harry Potter is like triple X rated.
That's a train ticket to hell. So so I kind of like strayed off of that path, just not out of like bitterness or I think it was more just like the allure of it, just like kind of straight off of that. Did that throughout college and. Then I decided one day I had
straight off of Christianity?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, just because it was...
Would you have still called yourself a Christian?
I think I would have.
Yeah.
I think I would have called myself a Christian because, my parents also raised us. They're like, even if you're not living right, you should still be in church. So even, I would go partying and drinking and doing stupid stuff, but then it's like, well... I know it's 2 a.m., but I got to be at church at 9. So, so I still had that ingrained in me, which was a lifesaver at a later time in life. But did that through college and decided to go to Los Angeles. And I actually was, it was supposed to be with a friend of mine. Her name was Brittany. She's the one who told me about Los Angeles Recording School, which was a school that was aimed at production engineering, producing, stuff like that.
Yeah. So you moved with her at the same time as her?
So we were planning on like sharing an apartment because living in Los Angeles. Is this
a friend or a friend?
At that time, it was a friend.
Okay.
But in the same breath.
Was there any romantic interest there or no?
Not anything that was acted upon.
Okay.
I mean, she was a pretty girl, but it wasn't like. I think I was always like, I want to find the one I'm going to marry.
Right.
Even though I was like living and doing stupid stuff, I was still on the prowl for
you knew she wasn't the one.
A woman. I still wanted a godly woman.
Yeah.
Even though I was not a godly man.
Right.
I was like, I know I need a good woman. So we were supposed to move out to Los Angeles together, which, I mean, now that I'm almost 40 years old, I look back and I've been like, that would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
That would have been a terrible decision.
Probably so.
So she actually never ended up moving, and I did.
Okay.
So moved out to Los Angeles when I was 22, and that was my first time living by myself, away from home.
Why was Los Angeles the destination, and what was waiting for you when you got there? Like, did you know what you were going to do?
In a way, I think Los Angeles was the destination just because of the school. Because after
music related,
okay. Yeah. Because when I was doing business stuff, I loved the business classes, hated the math classes, but then I took an elective classical guitar class, and a piano class, and I loved that. So I actually switched my major to music my last year of college. But then I realized like a college degree is probably not going to help me with what I want to do with music.
Right.
So that was a big driving factor of dropping out, but then also.
Maybe if you're going to be in an orchestra, that might make sense.
Well,
maybe, but
yeah, and I think that colleges has changed so much, and boy, this would be a topic. But college has just changed so much. You just don't. In a lot of ways, you don't need college. College is more like people, especially on job applications. They just want to see that you stayed committed to something and finished it. It's almost like they don't even care what you learned from it because they're going to teach you what you need for that job anyway. They just want to see if you start something, can you finish it?
Yeah.
That's a really expensive question to answer to an employer.
Yeah.
Like, if you start something, can you finish it?
Yeah.
$120,000 says I can.
Right.
Like,
well, and so that's just the financial side, but then also you sacrifice 4 years of your life that you could have been doing other things or building a resume or building wealth or whatever it is. It's like
and also
it's
building
expensive
experience
with your time and your money.
But, building experience as well. Because so I did, to jump forward, I did this school in Los Angeles. It was called the Los Angeles Recording School. It was 9 months intensive. I was at school 40 plus hours a week, so it was like a full-time job.
Yeah.
I was at school and did all those classes, did homework, and then they were really pushing us to get internships at studios to where we get hands-on experience.
I would think an LA recording school, music school, would be very intensive, right?
Yeah,
I would think the competition would be pretty high.
Yeah. And it was a lot of people who weren't like anyone, but that were trying to act like they were someone. So then you're like competing with other people who aren't they're nobodies. Like all of us were nobodies. Like nobody knows who we are. Why are we coming in here feeling like we're...
Well, if you're going to school for music, then that means almost by definition that you haven't actually accomplished anything.
You have not made it yet.
Yeah.
So calm down. But I learned more hands-on in a suit. So I got an internship at a studio. My first internship I did 1 day at this studio. And they whooped out cocaine, weed. They were doing promiscuous stuff in the vocal booth. And I'm just sitting there like engineering. And I'm like, I for sure don't want to be a part of this. Like, but that's also like, that's the culture of the music scene in Los Angeles. But it was very gross. And at that time, I was still not living right. And I could still see that and be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah. You know?
So you can just foreshadow and foresee what the road that leads to.
I mean, even as unrealistic as movies are, you could just watch a movie and be like, oh yeah, drugs lead to bad things.
Right.
Like, so I don't want to do that.
Or like the South Park line with Mr. Mackey. Have you ever watched South Park before?
It's been a long time, but I have seen it.
No, Mr. Mackey. He says MK a lot,
yeah.
so they call him Mr. Mackey in the TV show. But he's like, drugs are bad.
Okay. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
day one, you see all that,
and I was just like, this is disgusting. And it was actually, that studio was a recommendation from a teacher that went to school. So I mean, that's kind of the culture. So then. But going back to my roots, I moved to Los Angeles. What was waiting for me, I didn't necessarily have expectations because I was never like, I want to be a big this or a big producer or big this. I think I was just like, I just want to do music. I think that would be a really cool career path.
Yeah.
And how that looks, I don't know. I played piano, I played guitar, played bass, but like compared to Los Angeles musicians, when people are like, do you play anything? I'm like, no. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to play for you. They got, all these amazing players. So I was like, maybe it's engineering. I'll do engineering and production stuff and kind of embrace that. But what was waiting for me was no expectation, but like, let's see what happens. I remember driving my dad to the airport and him flying because he helped me move. And then I drove back to my apartment, which was literally between Sunset Boulevard and Hollywood Boulevard, right off the 101. So, I mean, I was in the heart of Hollywood. And I went back to my apartment and sat in my empty apartment by myself. No friends. I knew no one. I didn't even know of any church there.
How did you afford an apartment by yourself at that time?
So, well, I mean, that was back in, when did I move there? It was August when I was 22. So it was 2007. Yep, 2007. And my dad's rule for all of the kids, he had 5 kids, his rule is, if you make A's or B's, I'll pay for college.
Okay.
If you make C's or lower, you pay for college. So we were incentivized to make good grades.
Yeah.
And it was true. When I had a C or a D, which was frequent, I had to pay for those classes, Yeah. But his deal for me in that was I'll pay for your school and I'll pay for your apartment. But once you graduate, everything stops.
Yeah.
You have to figure that out. So I was like, okay. So he was a big proponent of like, allowing us to pursue our passions without getting into major debt. And so I sat in my apartment alone, and I was like, well, this is boring and lonely, so let's just go get some alcohol because that'll fix it.
Yeah.
Which it didn't. So that was I think that was on a Saturday when he left. And I knew, because that ingrained, my mom ingraining it in us, like, you're always at church. Like, I remember times where I was literally throwing up at home. And I was like, Mom, I cannot go to church. I am throwing up. And she would tell me to grab a plastic bag.
From being hungover, or what do you mean?
No. Just from, like,
You're
if
sick.
I had food poisoning.
Gotcha.
And I'm throwing up, and she's like, get a plastic bag. And I was like, Mom, I'm not going to sit. She's like, if you're sick, you need to be in church. That's where you're going to get healed.
Right.
So, like, I mean, I'm not even kidding when I'm telling you, me and my brothers would go to church with plastic bags if we were sick. And if we threw up, we would throw up in the plastic bag.
Yeah.
That's just what it was.
Are you thankful for that looking back, though?
I am beyond grateful that was ingrained into me.
Yeah.
Because when I moved to Los Angeles, if it was like you can choose whether or not you want to go to church. Oh, are you tired? Oh, you don't have to go to church today. Like that to me, there's such an importance. The Bible says don't neglect the gathering of the saints, like the gathering of the brethren and meeting with people. And I think church is so important for just community. And while technology is amazing and such an amazing gift to bring the gospel, you even just go back a couple decades, you couldn't. There were areas of the world that you couldn't get the gospel to, and now like everyone, I don't even know the percentage, but everyone in the world has a phone, and can easily log on and see the gospel from anywhere in the world. So technology is amazing, but it shouldn't be like the end all be all. Like you shouldn't just rely on, couch church, which is fantastic to be able to do that. And I know sometimes even my wife and I, we had a season where I'd done 16 years of ministry, had about 4 months where I was unemployed. And we did couch church many times, but we did it intentionally. Yeah. But when
was that during COVID or was that under different circumstances?
No, that was just several months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was under different circumstances. But to track back, that Saturday when my dad left, I went and got some alcohol and probably got inebriated to some extent. But I called my brother and I was like,
maybe.
Yeah, I called my brother. Just maybe a little bit. But I called my brother and I was like, hey, I need to find a church to go to tomorrow. And he was like, oh, you should check out, at that time, he was like, you should check out Free Chapel. So I was like, what's Free Chapel? He's like, it's Jensen Franklin. I was like, who's Jensen Franklin? He's like, I don't know. It's a big church that's out there. So I looked and I was like, well, that's like an hour and a half away. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, check out, there was a guitarist. I think his name was Lincoln Brewster. I think that's who it was.
I'm familiar with that name.
I think, this was a long time ago, but I think was at a church out there. He's like, oh, check out that church. And whatever the church was, I was like, well, that one's 45 minutes away. I'm like, I don't want to do that. So then he was like, oh, check out
45 minutes in LA is like 3 miles.
It legitimately is, yeah. So he said, oh, check out Dream Center. I've heard about Dream Center before.
Okay.
So I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is 3 miles away.
Yeah.
So it was only 45 minutes to get there. But it was literally
Was that the actual time though?
At times, yes.
Wow.
That's legitimate. Like,
That's crazy.
My wife and I, when we lived in that apartment that I moved to LA in, there were times we would go to work and in the mornings, it was that 3 mile trek on the 101, easily half an hour.
Wow.
Easily half an hour.
Yeah.
So I did. I showed up that Sunday morning and sat in the back, right next to a guy named Jackie. And, he said hi to me and stuff like that. And I'm watching this church service. I'm like, oh, this church is like way cooler than the churches I went to in Texas. Like this church is pretty cool. So, and that was in August of 2007, and started attending that church. And at Christmas, I came back to San Antonio and had Christmas with my family. And just in a moment of desperation, I was like, all right, God, like, because I had been going to church every Sunday, and I started asking to be plugged in. Like, hey, can I do something? And they're like, well, what do you do? I was like, I just help. Like, tell me what I can help with. And they're like, well, you could help us, like, tape cables down so people don't trip over them. You can help us, roll stuff up, put stuff away. I was like, great. When do I, where do I show up?
Yeah.
So I started helping out at church. And then they had their Christmas production where they were like, hey, do you want to come help us set up stuff for Christmas? Yeah. And I had no clue what that meant. I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And then, like, Christmas production setup at a mega church is really rough.
It's a different level.
So, they're like, all right, you see that halo that's like 30 feet above the stage? We're going to climb that up, and then we're going to wrap a rope around it. And then we're going to have some guys down here pull this winch up that weighs like 150 pounds. And then you're going to use hamburger clips and clamp it to the thing. And I'm like, cool, where's the harness? And they're like, no harness. Just get on up there. So literally me and this other guy named
risking
Anthony.
your life for the faith,
it's just like
you could have been a genuine martyr.
Listen, there's a lot of stuff that it's like, oh yeah, like the excuses. Oh, brother, it's just ministry. And I'm like, well, when you're talking about like falling 30 feet, that's just rethink that. So I would climb up. I did it, and I climbed up these 30-foot tall trusses, and they would pull these things up. We'd clamp them, and I think legitimately we hung 20-something winches across the big halo truss system. And so I was like, man, this is like crazy manual labor, but it's so much fun to like be a part of a bunch of really cool people, helping them do something for the community. And the church was very community-based, so it was a free production for the community, open to the community. They would open this like Christmas grounds that was full of toys and presents. So they would give away tens of thousands of toys, a couple thousand bikes, and it was all free. So people of the community would come, get free toys. And we're talking these kids, if this church did not do that, these kids wouldn't have gotten anything for Christmas. Right. Like this was their Christmas. Yeah. So you're seeing the joy in these kids that are just bawling because it's like a bike was never in the cards for them. And like they're walking away with, and we're not talking like a cheap bike. Like they're walking away with a really nice bike that someone donated for the giveaway. So at that point I was just like, man, church is cool. If this is what church is like, this is different than what I know church to be. Yeah. Like if this is what church is like, I could get on this bandwagon. But then I went back home. I was still not living right. I was helping church and still not living right. Thank God they never asked me what do you do for fun? So, that would have been a quick way out the door.
When you say not living right, are you just saying drinking to excess or like what?
If I did drink, it was always in excess. Yeah. That was the issue. That I could never handle moderation. Because I think I've always been, I'm either 100% or I'm 0%. I'm either all or nothing. Yeah. So if they're like, hey, do you want a beer? I'd be like, yeah, I want all of them. Yeah. Let's do it all.
All the beers.
So it was always blackout drunk. It was always waking up not knowing, did I drive home? What happened? And it was the grace of God that nothing ever happened. But yeah, it was stupid stuff like that. Some promiscuity, I never did drugs. I did smoke for many years, but I never did drugs. Even drunk, I thought that was a terrible idea.
Smoke cigarettes or
smoke cigarettes?
Weed? Okay.
Never smoked weed.
Yeah.
Never done drugs of any kind. No hard drugs. No nothing. I've been offered it. I've been in the rooms where other people were doing it, and even drunk, I was like, that guy looks like an idiot. I'm saying, I was a drunkard with morals.
I'm just imagining you drunk and someone pulls out whatever drug it is, and you're like, that guy looks like an idiot.
Legitimately, I'm better than him. So
I'm better than him. Yeah.
So it was definitely, dude. It was the grace of God that kept me from all that nonsense, but. In San Antonio, that's where it happened. I was in a situation where I was like, all right, God, this is terrible. This is really stupid. If you get me out of this, I'll start living for you. Because I knew the game. I knew the rules. I knew what needed to happen. I was just being stubborn of releasing myself to the process. So I was like, all right, God, you get me out of this, I'll do it. I'll commit fully. And I was 22.
Out of your own sin, or what do you mean out of what?
Yeah, I think just out of living that life.
Yeah, okay.
I was just making stupid decisions left and right on purpose, just to do it. And
sin feels good.
It sure does. It does. It's fun.
Certainly in the short term.
It's fun for a season. The Bible even tells you so. But he got me out of it. He did. And I remember, I was just telling a friend yesterday this story, and I remember God saying clear as day, he's like, I kept my end of the bargain, now you keep yours. So I was like, all right, cool. And that was when I was, I think 2 or 3 weeks away from turning 23 years old. And here I am, 39, almost 40, and I've not touched alcohol since.
Wow.
I don't smoke cigarettes and just gave up on the party lifestyle. All my friends at that time, I
just quit everything cold turkey.
Yeah, and I had friends texting, calling back when you have to, if you were sending a text message, it would take 6 minutes because you had to type the number multiple times, like T T T T T H H E E E, like the T9, I think it was called. But I had text messages and calls, and where are you, man? We missed you, da 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 da. And I didn't tell them I was making a decision. I didn't tell them I changed. But I knew if this is going to last, if I'm going to make a change, because I am all or nothing, it's 100% nothing. I was like, the friends I've known for the last 5-6 years, I was like, I have to, this has to be abrupt.
Did you have to completely change friend groups, or did you just change your behavior while you were hanging out with those friends?
I never saw them again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I say I never saw them, I'm talking I didn't talk to them. I didn't text them. If they messaged me on Facebook or MySpace back in the day, if they messaged me, I just didn't respond. Because I knew if I'm going to do this and it's going to be a change that sticks, I have to do it this way.
Yeah.
Was it the right way to do it? I mean, in terms of friendship and stuff like that, they were probably owed an explanation, which they would have understood. But just recently, like a year ago, a friend of mine from that era of my life, because we lived in San Antonio for 4 years, I reached out to him and I was like, hey man, can I get lunch with you? And we went and got lunch and just caught up on stuff. And I told him, I said, man, I just wanted to apologize if I, hurt you guys, frustrated you, stuff like that. He goes, yeah, man, we didn't know if you had died or not. You just disappeared.
Whoa.
The only reason we knew you were okay is because one of our friend groups was a friend of mine that we went to the same church. So, there was a connection there.
Yeah.
But he was just like, dude, you were gone.
Whoa.
And I was like, I know, I had to.
Yeah.
Like I had to. So I had no friends. I didn't have friends. So I really clung on to the community at the church, got plugged in, started helping out, started volunteering. They offered me a job, an unpaid job. I think that internship.
Not a job.
Internship is what they call that.
Volunteer position.
Yeah, volunteer position. And I knew the day, May, my graduation date was approaching, and I was like, if I'm going to stay out here, I need to figure this out. But I was so drawn to the church, I was like, I have to figure this out. So I did. I said, hey, I need to get paid. They're like, hey, our process is you have to volunteer for a year, and then at that point we could bring you on staff, but like our starting pay is $300 a month, tax-free. Like that's our starting pay. And the tiers were like $300, $500, $700, $900, $1,100. Like it was like $200 increments. And it was like every 6 months or so you can get up boosted to, and I'm like,
not the most promising.
This is, I can't afford anything in Los Angeles with that. So I was so sure of it that I said, man, if this is God, let's do it. So I did it. And within.
Did they cover expenses though?
No.
They didn't have a place for you to live or anything?
The Dream Center has like dorm style, living quarters. But
so you did live on campus though?
No, I never did.
No.
I had an apartment. By the time I graduated, so when I started volunteering,
$300 a month?
No. Wait. God was better
I'll be
than
patient.
that. So I started in January volunteering. By May, my salary was $3,500 a month.
Wow.
And it was a total God thing because I told God, like, all right, like if this is what I'm supposed to do, I need you to make it clear that this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And he did. Time after time, just boom, 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 boom. So by the time I graduated, I was able to float all my bills without my dad's help, which was awesome. Freeing, independent. And then that May, after I graduated, I actually met my wife. And we dated 4 months, long distance. Then she moved to Los Angeles. We dated 4 months. I proposed. We got married 7 months later, and now we're 14 and a half years into marriage with 4 kids.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So God,
how did you go?
God was good.
How did you go from 300 to 3,500 though? How did you make that jump?
Legitimate, like prayer and faith. That's all it was. Because
that was all at the Dream Center.
I was all at the Dream Center.
Yeah.
I started volunteering, and I said, hey, like I need money for groceries, for bills. I need to start fast tracking the payment schedule. And my boss at the time was very much like, that doesn't happen. Like, we'll get you on the path, but like low expectations. So, but they started paying me, and I was just like, no, God's better than this. And not saying like they weren't listening to God. It's not that. I'm saying my view and my belief of who God was, I was like, nah, the righteous ain't begging for no bread. Like, he's going to be better to me than this. So I just started praying, and I just, I don't know, theologists may say that I was praying wrong, but I was like, all right, God, I'm keeping my end of the bargain. You kept yours. You got me out. Now I'm keeping mine. This is a good thing. Like, you do something, I'll do something, you do something. Like, come on, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Probably terrible theology, but I prayed and God just made it happen.
Yeah.
Time and time again. And any time I asked, it was like there wasn't a hesitation. There was just favor on everything I asked for. And I didn't ask for excess. I didn't ask for, this absurd. I was just like, this is what it's going to cost me to live in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And like to have a little bit in case of an emergency is $3,500 a month. I'm single. I live in Hollywood. I have an apartment. I have a car. There's bills I have to pay. This is what it's going to take. So I wrote that number down.
Yeah.
I prayed over it. And when I asked, because I think I started getting paid in February, I asked in March for a raise, and they raised me. My first raise was from $300 to $1,500.
Wow.
In a month. And my boss continued to tell me, I don't know what, they don't do this.
Wow.
But it was someone else making the decision. In the next month, I was like, all right, like, God, am I abusing your goodness, or can I ask for more? Because, again, I didn't want to have to rely on Dad.
Right.
And so the next month, they boosted me 1,000. And then by May of that year, they boosted me another 1,000. And I was like right at the threshold. I was like, this is the number I wrote down in January. This is exactly what I needed. And then I never asked for a raise again.
Wow. Because they just did it on their own.
They did it on their own.
Wow.
So about a year and a half after that, the pastor asked me, he called me and said, "Hey, I wanna offer you the position of the worship leader at the church," because I had gotten involved with doing music, playing, singing, and stuff like that. And I was just straight up, I was like, I don't know anything about being a worship leader.
Yeah.
Like, I was on the worship team, like I knew how to like lead a song, but as far as like all the details of that, like,
yeah.
I see what the guy who's in charge now is doing, but I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Don't worry, there's a lot of grace."
Did the old guy leave, or what was the...
Yeah. So he went off. He had a record label at the time and became really successful and did a lot of stuff with the record label. Some video stuff that I heard of, and we're still in contact to this day.
Yeah.
And he taught me a lot.
So you learned under him?
A lot. Yeah, I was.
Okay.
He had two assistants. He had an administrative assistant and a music assistant, and I was his music assistant. And I mean, I learned a ton of stuff from him.
Wow.
As in everything, you learn things to do, things not to do. But I walked away from that like, wow, I gained a lot of wisdom in this time under him. And then I told the pastor, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll pray about it. So my wife and I prayed about it. We accepted. And he was like, there's a lot of grace. Mess up as much as you need to, but figure it out.
Right.
And that's what me and my wife did. We worked together on it and figured it out.
Yeah. So, okay, so I know the Dream Center is like the general name for it.
Yeah.
Is the church under a different name? Okay, what's the name of the church?
Angelus Temple.
Angelus Temple.
Yeah.
And who founded Angelus Temple?
Amy Simple McPherson,
Okay.
back in 1923.
And tell us a little bit about who that is.
So she was a pioneer in that she was very extravagant in her sermons. She did these massive illustrated sermons. She was very theatrical. So in the early 1920s, late 19 teens, I guess you'd call.
Yeah.
Women preachers or women as a leader in a church or as the pastor was big no.
Yeah.
Like it was just that doesn't happen. And she was divorced.
Okay.
So she had two things just running against her, but she was like, I know that I'm called to do this. So she did a lot of evangelical stuff, outreaches, and she raised $5,000 and told a building crew, because she had this land that she had and was going to start building a church. And the builder said, you only have enough money to dig the hole. And she told them, dig the hole and God will fill it. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
They started digging the hole. The money came in, all of the funds to build everything, and they built it, opened it on January 1st, 1923, completely out of debt.
Yeah. Wow.
God did it.
Yeah.
So she was very theatrical. She had her parsonage was on the property, and she would leave her parsonage, and there was a door on the second story, because it's three stories. And on the second story, she had this massive ramp built all the way down to the stage.
Okay.
She had a Kimball organ, one of three in the world, this massive pipe organ.
Wow.
And they would play the pipe organ, and she would walk out of this door, and she would have several dozen roses in her like a bouquet of roses every time she preached. And she'd walk down that big ramp, and I mean, she was a celebrity.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Hollywood elite in the like Charlie Chaplin days.
Was Hollywood known as like the creative center of the U.S. at that point?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So like Charlie Chaplin attended her church.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was
awesome.
that big, and she was very strategic in even how she did it, because the church was like, it almost looked like a baseball diamond. Like it had a thing like this, and then it had a circular front.
Okay.
And she had this aimed towards downtown Los Angeles, and this aimed towards Hollywood. And she had designed it to be a megaphone, because she was like, we will preach the gospel from here and reach Los Angeles, we'll reach Hollywood. So she was very, ahead of the curve in that. She thought about everything. And very theatrical, did big illustrated sermons, big grandiose productions, stuff like that. And it was at a time where people in Hollywood were coming to her church services, her big illustrated sermons, to get ideas for their movies.
Okay.
So, nowadays we see like, oh man, I want to do this at service. I saw it at a Beyonce concert, whatever.
Yeah. It's the other way around.
It was the other way around back then, which is how I feel like, man, it would be so nice to get back to that,
Yeah,
where the
for
world looks to the church for ideas.
Yeah.
The world looks to the church for like concepts of what they can do.
I remember I went to CSU for a semester. I ended up graduating at UNC in Greeley, but I went to CSU for a semester, and I had to take a history class. It was just part of our required classes. We had to take a recent American history class.
Yeah.
I want to say it started, forget the year that they started. I think it was like Civil War era to like current day. And so anyway, we're going through the history. We get to like the 1920s, 1930s. And this was after my dad had preached at Angelus Temple. So we get to like this era, and up pops a slide, Amy Semple McPherson, in my history class.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And he's like telling the history of Angelus Temple, and Amy Semple McPherson was like the first or second woman to have a radio show.
Yep.
Something like that.
She owned a radio station.
Okay. Yeah. But like just pioneer for women's rights, but then, you know, just Christianity in the U.S. period, and just her reach and influence in Hollywood and all this stuff. He's going through this whole history. And I got to tell him later, I didn't want to say it in front of the class.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that kid that, you know.
My daddy preached there.
Right, yeah. But like I got to talk to my history professor and be like, yeah, my dad actually preached at her church.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time we took a tour of Angelus Temple, they showed us, I think it's in the basement, but they showed us like all the crutches and the cast.
Yeah, that's in the parsonage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was still a teenager at that point, but they had like this room just filled with basically testimonies of miracles.
Absolutely.
And healings and things that had happened at that church. But then my dad got to play her piano.
Yeah.
Which was crazy. Like I took a picture of it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And then all of a sudden my history teacher is telling us about this woman and this church and the influence that it had in the U.S. And I'm like, whoa, that's insane.
Yeah, her renown reached far and wide.
Yeah.
And even in Time put out a magazine called The 100 Greatest Unsolved Mysteries of All Time.
Okay.
And a story about her was in that Time magazine.
Really?
So I mean,
what was the mystery? So
she had as with everybody, we all have things that we work through. Like no one's perfect.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, ministers are put on such a stand and a podium where it's like the general thought is like they have to be perfect to teach me, or they have to be perfect to preach the word of God.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, the disciples were terrible people. King David, a man after God's own heart, was a horrible person, you know?
Yeah.
Terrible father.
Certainly did horrible things.
Yeah, did some horrible things, but you know, God still used him and stuff. But Amy had some issues that plagued her decisions and stuff. And the story goes that she disappeared one day and showed up months later. I think it was weeks or months later. And her story was she got abducted and pulled out to the desert and held hostage. And she walked back to Los Angeles from the desert. She broke free, got free of her captors, and walked back. Well, the issue became, it was major news because she was essentially a celebrity back then. And, the investigations showed up that, like the shoes she walked to Los Angeles in from the desert looked brand new. Like there was no wear on them.
Yeah.
There was no like dirt or sand or anything like that. So there was a lot of things that kind of didn't fit the story.
Yeah.
And the speculation is that she was, seeing someone. She had several divorces, so maybe she was seeing what's the opposite of a mistress? A manstress? I don't know, something. Just made up a word. So it was still to this day an unsolved mystery. No one knows what really happened.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was only an issue because she was so popular.
Yeah.
She was so famous.
That's interesting. Wow. Okay, so LA, and then what happened between then? Oh, by the way, I remember. So you guys have a recording studio at Angelus Temple?
At
or
the church, the Dream Center.
Okay. And I remember when I did a tour there was a Grammy.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, there was
in
a
the
Grammy
recording
there.
studio. What's the story behind that?
So we did an album for Ty Tribbett called Greater Than, and recorded it at the church. And
Were you involved in this process?
I was the executive producer of it.
Wow.
So I lined up everything for the church, made sure all of, he brought him and his team and their people, but we were the other half of that, making sure the console, all the technical aspects, all that side of everything was good, going and running. And the Grammy actually belongs to a guy named Tom, who engineered that. And I didn't realize until after the fact that I could have also applied and gotten a Grammy.
Yeah.
That I was the EP of that album. I could have gotten a Grammy too.
Dang it.
So Tom gets this Grammy in the mail, and he's like taking pictures with it, and he sets it up in the studio.
Was he not invited to the award ceremony or whatever?
No.
Why?
No,
I
because
assume if you win a Grammy, you're going to be like.
Well, you don't know you win until the award ceremony, but but Ty was there and accepted the Grammy as Gospel album of the Year. I think he won like Song of the Year or something like that. I think he won 2 Grammys. But anyways, Tom applied to the Grammy Association and got his Grammy trophy, and I was like, dude, what the heck? I could have. Why didn't you fill my name out too? Yeah. And he was like, dude, it was such a hassle. He was like, it was a hassle tracking it down. I feel so bad for him. I feel so bad. He's like, but he, so terrible. So, poor guy. And I remember, I was like, that sucks. Like, I could have a Grammy right now. Like, I could have one with my name on it, and it would be legit. Like, I wouldn't be like one of those like bystander Grammys, you know? Yeah. And I remember I was like, I don't want a Grammy for that. Yeah. I was like, I want a Grammy for something that I wrote. Yeah. I don't want a Grammy for like. Yeah, that was a lot of work, and I was a part of it, and it wouldn't have happened without me, but at the same time, it's like, how cool would it be to have a Grammy like, best Christian contemporary song or best country song, whatever it is, and it's like, oh yeah, that's because I wrote that. Yeah. I feel like that would be much more of an accomplishment than like executive producer. Right. I stood next to Tom while he recorded. But still, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be offended if Grammy Association was like, hey, we muffed up on this one, here's your Grammy. I'd be like, all right, cool, I'll put it here for everyone to see. So, Tom won a Grammy, and then he won another one for Lecrae. So he won 2 Grammys. Okay. In that studio, which was pretty awesome, yeah.
And that's the studio that you got to record in? You got
I oversaw for 9 years. Bro. And Tom was every bit of he deserved those Grammys. Yeah. He's a hard worker and a great engineer and producer and mixer.
That's cool.
So,
is he still there?
He's not. No, he still lives in Los Angeles. Still does music. Yeah. He's moved on from the church.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
From the church generally, or just from Angelus Temple?
Just from Angelus Temple.
Okay. I didn't know, maybe he became an atheist or something, but
no, not that I know of. But who knows?
So we have a couple minutes left here. So then, what happened? You move on from Angelus Temple. Is there a story there for why you left? If not, no big deal.
Well, with a couple minutes, I'll condense it.
And then, what did you do after that, and what are you doing today?
So I left Angelus Temple. We had 2 kids, and we just felt like our assignment in Los Angeles was coming to a close. So then we left Angelus Temple, moved to Texas. I was there for 4 years. I moved to Texas 6 weeks before COVID hit. So, we moved to Texas February 1st, 2020. Okay. And COVID hit 6 weeks later. Yep. Was there for 4 years. At the end of December, I was let go from the church in San Antonio because they were doing budget cuts across the board. And spent four months on a forced sabbatical, which was really awesome for my family. And then,
are you being sarcastic? Or
no,
was it awesome?
I'm very like that. I was in full-time ministry for 16 years. Yeah. I may have missed 10 Sundays in 16 years.
You might get burned out a little bit.
But I never got burnt out.
Okay.
I don't know. I think I view those things differently or approach work and things like that different. But moved to San Antonio, was there for 4 years, did a 4-month forced sabbatical, and then I got a call from Jonathan Wiggins here in Loveland, and he offered me a position here, which him and I have always kind of dreamed about. How cool would it be to do ministry together one day?
And the stars aligned.
The stars aligned.
Yeah.
All the stars in Loveland. It's probably a country song waiting to happen.
I don't know. We have some light pollution here, so there's a few stars, but...
Yeah, but you don't have the humidity that Texas does.
Good point.
Weather's nice here. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm the worship and production pastor here at Res Church, and and it's awesome.
Heck yeah.
Ready for the next season.
Here we go.
God's
man.
gonna do some cool stuff.
Yeah. That's exciting. Well, is there anything you want to shout out? I don't know, like if you have music stuff going on that you want to direct people towards, or a website or social media, anything like that. Closing words for Mr. Joel Bodker.
No, I don't think so.
No? Good?
Twitter.com/ResChurch. Is that the church's? Dude,
Probably.
I've never wanted to like do things.
I think it's x.com.
X.com.
Yeah,
there it is.
something
Yeah.
like that,
Well,
yeah.
Elon Musk is a brilliant man. No. I'm not, I've always thought like ministry should be not about me. So like I've never tried to use my platform to like gain notoriety or like, oh man, well I'm writing music. Let me put it out at church so I can get. I've always thought that was like distasteful.
I'll ask you on a personal level. Do
Yeah.
you have albums, or like do you have a Spotify account? Do you have YouTube stuff? Do you have anything?
I have a
like
Spotify
that,
account for listening to music, but no.
You don't have songs out there right now?
No, I do.
Come on.
I have some songs out there.
I know you do.
One of them is I wrote with my old worship leader back. I mean, this is 15 plus years ago, and it's still played on the radio.
Really?
Yeah. Still,
Is it a Christian song?
It's still played on like Air One, and I still get BMI royalty checks from it.
No way.
It's like $2 checks, but
Right.
whatever. But yeah, it's still to this day. It's still played on the radio. Still
Pretty cool.
requested.
What's the name of the
still played.
song?
It's called Angels Sing.
Okay. Angels, plural?
Angels Sing.
Yeah, Angels Sing. Okay.
Yeah, back in the day, man.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
There's some stuff out there, but
Well, dude, I appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this. And,
Yeah.
And we'll have to do it again one of these days. So thank you so much.
Part 2.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.